In this video, we're going to be replacing the high-pressure power steering pump on this 2005 Honda Element. So what we're going to do now is on our power steering pressure hose line, we can see that it's bolted down with a clamp right here. We're going to remove that clamp. It's going to be a 10 millimeter on a socket. This is one of those tough spots where you definitely don't want to drop the bolt. We're just going to pull that up a little bit if we can, just to get it free. It looks like it's free there. Okay. So now we're going to continue back here, and we're going to remove this connection here. Now this connection right back here, this is going to be a 9/16. It's also going to require that you put down some kind of spill collection, because inside this line there is power steering fluid. So once we crack this line free, we're going to have power steering fluid dripping out. What you don't want to do is get this power steering fluid all over the place, so try and be as clean as you can. Okay. Once you have your connection here loose, you can see your hose is just pressed in there. So what we'll do is we're going to let that drain, and while that's draining, we're going to move up front to our power steering pump and remove the other side of the hose from there. Now if we follow our power steering pressure line to our power steering pump, you'll see where it connects up top. We're going to have a 10 millimeter in the back and an 8 millimeter in front. Before you start this process, even though we've done the back, there still will be residual fluid on this side of the hose. You do not want to get that fluid on your belt or in your pulleys. So what we're going to do is set ourselves up with some kind of spill protection. In this case, we have an absorbent pad. So we're going to protect the pulleys and the hose the best we can. All right, so now that we have pretty much everything protected that we need to protect, we can go ahead and remove our line. We're going to start with the 10 millimeter on the back. Now I'll move to the 8 millimeter up front. So now we have our two bolts removed. We're going to take our pressure hose and pull it out of the power steering pump. Again, you're going to want to be ready. We have a pad here we're going to put down. We're going to put our pressure hose into that pad. You're going to want to be ready for fluid to come out. Okay, so it's out now. We'll go ahead and put it right in there. And we'll let that fluid collect. What we're also going to do is take a couple more pads and just back this up. And we will move this slightly lower, let gravity drain it for us. So now our hose is free in the front and the back. So now if we follow our hose backwards, we're going to see we have one electrical connection here attached to this T-junction. That's going to be our gray plug here. And if we follow that a little further back towards the driver's side, we'll see we have one more bolt on a clamp holding the hose down. It's going to be a 10 millimeter bolt. We're going to take that bolt out first. And then we'll move to our electrical. Again, in this area here, try not to drop the bolt. It is a little tight to work. All right, so now we have our electrical connection here. I'm just going to go ahead and grab that connector, squeeze, and remove it. At this point, we can go ahead and remove our line. So now we're ready to pull our pressure line out of the vehicle. This is an optional step, but it will sometimes save you. I like to take a rubber glove or a Ziploc bag, put your ends into there, best you can. Sometimes you can masking tape or zip tie. What this will help is any residual fluid in the line won't spill all over your motor. Sometimes it'll get on things that warm up and you'll create smoke. Sometimes it won't be an issue at all. Okay, so we're not going to zip tie them or tape them on. We're just going to hope they stay on. We're going to remove our line straight out the front. Just like that. So we're going to take our new line and we're going to feed it down into place. There's going to be 2 bracket clips that we're going to need to line up, but we're not going to worry too much about that at first. We're going to get things into their position. All right, so the line's going to go down the back close to where it needs to be. We're not going to worry about this yet. We are going to put our front into the power steering pump. All right, so we're going to push down our hose into the power steering pump. There is an O-ring there, so we may have to give it a good push till it seats nice and flush. And from there we have 2 bolts. Our 10 millimeter is going to go in the back. Let's start that by hand. And our 8 millimeter is going to go in the front. Now what we're going to do is snug these up. Okay, now we'll continue down the line, work towards the back. So now following our pressure line and our power steering pump here back, we have our end that we're going to put into our power steering rack. So what we're going to do is pull our flared or our nut back. We're going to set our line in. And before you do this, this is always a good check. Just make sure you look around the edge here. Make sure there's no damage to this flare. And if everything looks good, and go ahead and insert that in there. And we're going to press our nut into place and tighten that down by hand to start. Sometimes what I like to do is just give the line a little twist. Sometimes I like to pull it back against the nut as I tighten it down, just to try and make sure it seats nice and flush on the inside. You don't want this to tighten down at an angle. All right, so just give it a couple of turns as you're working. All right, we've got it about as far as we can by hand. We'll come back with our 9/16, and we'll tighten it down. All right, so we've got it pretty well snugged up. What we don't want to do is lock it into position. Just at this second, we want to make sure that our clamps, our line clamps, are actually lining up. So you can see we're way too far away on one of them. So what we'll do is back off that nut just a little bit until the line is loose. Like so. We'll line up our clamps. Make sure both of them are lined up. Looks good. And what we'll do to make sure we're not moving is we'll actually start our threads on our bolts for our clamps. So we'll take the bolt, put it through, and then put it into position. So just come in here with our tool. You just want to start this. Don't need to necessarily tighten this down all the way, just to get it started. There we go. And we'll go ahead and put the other one in. Now this is just ensuring that our line stays in place. And we'll just tighten that one down because it's so hard to get to. We'll just do it once. And now we can go back to our nut here on the line and just tighten that down. This nut here that we just tightened down, you're going to want to tighten that down or torque that down to 27 foot-pounds. Okay. So your two bolts up front, your 8 and your 10 millimeter, are going to get torqued down to 8 foot-pounds. Now that we have our line fully tightened up, we can go ahead and tighten down our clamp. And then we can move up a little bit in the middle of the line and plug in our electrical connection. So now we have our pressure switch, our electrical connection here. We're just going to plug that back in. All right, just click that in. And this connector here, if you decide to or want to plug it back in before you bolt down your hoses and your clamps, might be a little bit easier, but either way, it's not too difficult. Now that we have that plugged in, we move this hose out of the way, out of this clamp. I'm just going to go ahead and set that back in. At this point, you're going to want to start your vehicle, run it, turn your wheel lock to lock, which is all the way to one side and then all the way to the other side a few times. What you're going to try and do is get fluid through this hose and into the system. Once that's good, everything's working the way it should, you're all done. You want to come over here and check your power steering reservoir. You'll see you have two lines. You have an upper and a lower. In our case, our reservoir is completely empty. So what we're going to do is pop the cap, and we're going to fill between those two lines. From here, once we get into the vehicle, start and run our vehicle, we're going to move our steering from lock to lock, full turns all the way, both left and right, to cycle the power steering fluid through the lines and through the pump. This level should drop down to where we need it to be. If once all that's done, we come back out here and we're below the lower line, we'll add it back up to between these two lines. Once you've done that, you're all set.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.